Hi, I'm Gabriel Bergmoser, and I'm an author. My book, The Hunted, came out last year in 2020, published by HarperCollins Australia, and I'm very excited to be here having a chat about it. Absolutely. So The Hunted is a sort of a horror thriller in the vein of, if you imagine Assault on Precinct 13 meets Wake in Fright with a bit of a splash of Wolf Creek in there as well. So it sort of kicks off on this desolate highway. There's a middle-aged guy, Frank. He's living in a roadhouse out there, and you get the impression that there's something in his past that he's sort of trying to get away from a bit. His young granddaughter's been sent to stay with him, but he has no idea what to talk to her about. They have a very sort of awkward relationship. And one afternoon, he's in the roadhouse, he's trying to make her a meal, trying to sort of, bond. And out of nowhere, this car comes careening up the front, comes to a halt at an odd angle. Door swings open, girl steps out covered in mud and blood. She's dragging a shotgun, and the only thing she says before she collapses is, "Don't call the police." Which then propels us into this, 12-hour siege story, peppered with flashbacks that explain who she is and how she got into that position. So I grew up in a small country town, and my small country town was nothing like the town that does factor quite majorly and quite horrifically in The Hunted. But I suppose it was a combination of little encounters that I had growing up, encounters with the sorts of guys who, populate the nearby pub, and, you run into them on the streets, and even guys in your school and everything as well, who just seem constantly to be looking for a fight, but they frame it all in this way of, "Oh, it's just a joke, mate. It's just a joke, mate. It's just a joke, mate," until next thing they're swinging a baseball bat at you, which is something that actually happened to me once. So again, I don't want to sort of denigrate my country town, because for the most part I loved it, but every now and then these encounters happened that just led me to think, or I guess to form this theory that there is this very dangerous edge to rural Australian masculinity that sometimes comes out in really insidious ways. And so The Hunted, I suppose, was a way of taking that notion and doing what I think good horror does and pushing it to its extreme as a way to explore it and comment on it. So I had a trilogy of YA novels published by a very small print publisher beforehand, Boone Shepherd, which could not have been more separate from The Hunted. It was Boone Shepherd was, imagine Tintin meets Doctor Who set in the world of Lemony Snicket. It was very quirky, there was lots of time travel, lots of egregious self-indulgent literary references, but they were a lot of fun. I had a blast writing those. Because I'm not good at anything else. I had a couple of really sobering moments in sort of high school and afterwards. All through high school, I wanted to be an actor. And I sort of wrote on the side as a bit of a hobby. I'd always been very obsessed with books and with movies and later on with theatre. But I would get to this point where I would have this overwhelming love for the works that really inspired me. And this is going to sound really strange, but the best way I can explain it is to say that I found myself wanting a kind of ownership over these works because I love them so much, but they could never be mine because they were written by somebody else. So I sort of reached this place of thinking, I guess I have to write my own. And the first stuff I wrote, as I suppose the first stuff most authors write unless they're a total prodigy, which I obviously wasn't, it was terrible. But all through school, I was kind of pursuing this acting career, and then I got to the point of realizing that I was a terrible actor. Sort of performing opposite some people who were really talented and have actually gone on to become quite successful, and having this moment of realization that I am nowhere near as good as them, and then sort of looking at all the other career options that were available to me, the more realistic career options in writer and actor, and realizing I was terrible at all of those, realizing that I had done shockingly in every subject in high school that was not English and literature. So I was sort of thinking, well, I guess it's gotta be this, because I have no other talents. So it was a combination of obviously passion and also necessity. I am now, yeah, which is a really lovely position to be in. So I sort of taught writing for a while at Melbourne Young Writers Studio over in Fitzroy. And on the side, I did a lot of freelance work, and this was while I was writing quite a bit of theatre and writing the Boone Shepherd books as well. And then when The Hunted got picked up, that's led to a lot more work in the film and TV sphere and other novel projects coming up and a couple of other projects I can't really speak about. But all of that together has become quite an extreme full-time job, which is exhilarating but very, very full on at the same time. Actually really difficult. And I think a lot of authors will probably relate to this, but I had quite a few experiences of, people sort of saying to me, "Oh, well, this lockdown must be great for writing. You must be getting a lot of writing done." And I was like, no, I'm stuck in my room. I can't get out and sort of, this might sound really pretentious, but I genuinely think that writers sort of need to soak up different environments and different experiences, and even if it's just like going for a walk or going away somewhere for a weekend or whatever it might be, but just experiences from which you can draw inspiration, I suppose. And when you are stuck in your room and the 5-kilometer radius around your house, there's really not a huge amount of that to be found. So honestly, I kind of battled to come up with ideas or to come up with things that I was passionate enough about to write for the majority of the lockdown, which is not a great position to be in when you've got sort of looming deadlines and, you know, books due and all of that. But sort of towards the end of it, I think I managed to kind of force my way into working again and into writing stuff that I think was a bit rusty at first, but eventually sort of found its feet and found its flow in a way that I think really worked. But no, creatively, 2020 sucked. From 2020, my favorite read, I think, would have to be Hideout by Jack Heath, which I would imagine quite a few of your viewers would have read. I read his books last year, and I mean, if anybody has read The Hunted, you'll kind of tell that I probably have a slightly bloodthirsty streak, and evidently Jack Heath does as well. And apart from the fact that Jack is a lovely guy who has been massively supportive of The Hunted, like his books Hangman, Hunter, and Hideout, which are 3 in an ongoing series, just walk that beautifully fine line of being really compelling thrillers while having this like kind of pitch black sense of humor and quite a dark but knowingly dark sensibility, but it never, for my money, goes too extreme. And he walks this really fine line, and they become very compelling page turners. And so when Hideout came out and I read that, I could not put it down. I was absolutely just like ripping through it, like page after page after page, and I found it just so surprising and so satisfying and so kind of shockingly original. I think, you know, everybody who is a crime thriller fan should be reading those books because they are brilliant. Oh God, that's a very difficult question. I think it must have been, in terms of at least a book series that I was really passionate about and kept coming back to, I think it was the Animorphs books. You know, K.A. Applegate, if people remember, you know, in the 90s, those like slim paperback volumes that I think were all ghostwritten, but, you know, would come out every month, and they had the covers of the really grotesque images of the teenagers turning into the animals. And I just got very, very obsessed with reading that series. And then that sort of, I guess, became a stepping stone to like Harry Potter, and then to A Series of Unfortunate Events, and then to John Marsden. And I think the confluence of all of those influences over quite an extended period of time, I suppose, fermented into this ongoing love of literature. So I have in April a new book coming out, which again is vastly different to The Hunted, The True Color of Little White Lie, which is a sort of YA coming of age story in the vein of, imagine Perks of Being a Wallflower or The Way, Way Back. It's quite quirky and quite sensitive and quite tender and nothing like The Hunted. So I'm sort of simultaneously excited for and dreading the response to it, because I've sort of already seen a couple of reviews come in from people who, you know, aren't like against it, but are just sort of like, this is not what I expected after The Hunted. And whether that is a beneficial thing or a challenge for the book, I don't know yet, but I'm really, really proud of this book, and I can't wait for people to read it. And then in August, The Inheritance, which is the sequel to The Hunted, comes out as well. So that will sort of be more in the vein of The Hunted for those who enjoyed that book. No, so I actually, this is a bit weird, but I wrote The Hunted in sort of 2 chunks a year apart. So if you've read the book, you know that it sort of alternates between past and present. So I originally wrote the past material as its own little novella, and then kind of couldn't let go of it, and a year later wrote the present material. But it was the in between those 2, I guess, extended writing sessions, I wrote this originally, its first draft. So this was kind of sitting in my drawer for a while, and then after The Hunted got published, I sort of, you know, got it out and gave it some tweaks and some rewrites, and sort of tentatively called my agent and was like, hey, do you want to look at something that's nothing like The Hunted and just sort of see if it maybe can find a home, which it did, which I'm incredibly grateful for. So I 100% wrote this book for the misfits and the oddballs of the world. Basically for people who are in that period of adolescence where you are trying to work out what your place in the world is, trying to work out who you are, trying to work out, I suppose, how you fit in, you know, the grand miasma of existence, and maybe have that gnawing fear that I think we all have at some point, that maybe there isn't a place for me, maybe I don't fit in, and maybe I'm never going to find somewhere that is right for me. And I think that is such a profound thing that we can all sort of go through as adolescents, and it was something that I really want to explore. So it's written for, you know, kids between 13 and 16 who maybe aren't feeling 100% like they know where they sit and where they belong. And I'm really hoping that it does find that audience, because I was very much one of those kids, and it was those experiences in a lot of ways that led me to write this book. Thanks so much for having me.